Greetings to you all and welcome to something a little bit different. So I was browsing the web, killing time, wasting life, and I found myself stumbling across AI art. It's an interesting field, and it was the entrance into a rabbit hole to which I promptly descended. I've always been interested in AI, and the more I looked into it, the more impressed I got. And ultimately I started to find other parts of AI that I didn't know existed, such as AI music generation and AI story writing. When I considered all of these different components together, I realized that what I was looking at was actually the basis for an entire story. A book, perhaps, or a game? A visual novel. That's what they're called. It's a sort of picture book with music. Digitally. Strange concept, but entertaining nonetheless. And so I wondered, what would happen if you got an AI to make an entire game? An entire visual novel by itself? Would it be good? Would it be legible? Would it just be a hilarious mess? I don't know, but I was curious to find out, so I did it. However, before we get started, the story generator needs an initial prompt, so it knows what to write about. Now, I'm not going to direct it at all. Instead, I'm going to give it 2 words. Ortega was. That should be enough for it to realize that Ortega is the main character, and therefore I can make the story all about me, and otherwise, give it complete total freedom. And so, welcome to Into a Different Realm. Title screen and title generated by the AI, which means they probably have no connection to the story whatsoever. Fantastic. From here on out, I'm going to be your narrator and nothing more. I will be reading the script verbatim, including all of its mistakes, and I will not be passing judgment or comment throughout. So, without further ado, let's get to it. Ortega was bored. He'd been waiting for hours at his post. His job was to guard the border of the village of Niffle, but he had no idea how boring that could be when all the villagers were being so damn stupid. He looked up as someone stepped from behind one of the tents. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying not to sound too interested in whatever they might have to say. The figure smiled, and Ortega realized it wasn't a stranger after all. It was him. It was him. Ortega was looking straight into his own eyes. Well, sorta, because there wasn't really any face there. No real eyes or anything. Only the outline of the body, with 2 holes. The hole on top was slightly bigger than the ones on the bottom. "What the hell are you doing?" Ortega cried. "Nothing wrong with staring," replied the creature. "You're a spirit?" The being shrugged. "Sure." And then the spirit vanished, leaving Ortega alone and confused. Invisible hands were gently caressing his body. The sensation didn't feel uncomfortable like some of the touches of the dead. In fact, it felt pretty good. His vision returned, and he was looking through his fingers into an enormous blue crystal ball. "What the hell?" he said again. The crystal was being held by a young woman who introduced herself as Mina. She told him she could see and interact with his mind, and that his mind was connected to hers somehow. She explained her plan, which involved using their shared thoughts to open a portal and sending him back in time. He agreed, though he thought this plan would get them killed. Ortega watched himself fall through the portal. Once he landed on solid ground, he opened his eyes and looked around. Everything seemed completely normal, except for the fact that there was a giant man with glowing purple skin standing next to him. "That's not possible," he thought. And with that, the man took off running. Ortega tried to follow, but suddenly his feet turned to rubber, making it impossible. Instead, he just stood there, watching the scene play out before him. That made his heart beat faster for reasons unknown to him, and he had to force himself to stop hyperventilating. He started walking, only to find himself once more surrounded by green trees. That doesn't make any sense, he muttered to himself. He knew there was no way in hell that trees could be green. He was probably just seeing things. It was the only explanation for this insanity. The sun was high in the sky. It was almost noon by now. Ortega couldn't stand to look at it anymore. There was a large town in front of him, with a small marketplace. He walked towards it, hoping to get some breakfast. The townspeople were very friendly and gave him several apples. He tried to thank them, but they wouldn't believe him. He approached a huge wooden door with several guards surrounding it. They all looked different, though. Their bodies weren't human, but they moved strangely and appeared taller than they actually were. Each wore armor and carried swords. When they noticed him approaching, he heard an order pass between them. One guard stepped forwards and bowed. The guards seemed to be expecting Ortega. Walking through the door, Ortega met 3 other people inside, who also all seemed to have different appearances. A man and a woman, perhaps? The third man didn't seem important, but had just appeared there without warning. Ortega stared at him for a moment. The group of 4 were then interrupted by the appearance of an older man in white clothing and pointed staff. Everyone bowed low until the man spoke. "Welcome to Gondolin. My name is Kukui, the chief of this town. Now please, take your places." The man indicated chairs, then sat down in one of the largest chairs. Ortega sat in one of the 4 smaller chairs and awaited Kukui's instructions. When everyone looked up, Kukui addressed the crowd. "Now, children, we must decide what our role should be in the upcoming war. First, we have a task to complete, which will require your help." Ortega looked over at the 3 strangers and frowned. They were talking quietly amongst themselves. "I have an important quest that the 4 of you must complete," announced Kukui. "But first..." Suddenly Kukui jumped to his feet and began pacing. His voice sounded weird. "We have to defeat..." The 3 strangers suddenly stopped talking and stared at Kukui as he continued pacing and yelling. "A dragon." The room erupted into chaos. Men shouted orders and ran around. Women screamed and cowered under tables. Kukui yelled at all the men to calm down and keep watch. Ortega was shocked to realize he was actually enjoying these events. After about a half hour, everyone calmed down and quieted. Finally, they got to talk again. Each of the 4 would-be dragon slayers took turns introducing themselves. Mina, she appeared out of thin air, said she saw a spirit who claimed to be her brother. The man, he was named Togami, and he was a nobleman from Rito village. Said he traveled from afar to deliver a message to his village, which had sent him there. The other man, his name was Yamada, and he was the son of King Endymion of Hyrule. And finally, Ortega himself. And so there you have it. That is chapter 1 of Into a Different Realm. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, because none of the other chapters have been written yet. But we've got a pretty good basis for a story, right? We can guess and predict a few things, I think. So the AI has somehow crafted a typical story where somebody gets sent to another world, goes to the nearest town, and then inadvertently gets mixed up into some substantial events going on there. It's a pretty standard fantasy story trope, so I can see why the AI would pull from it, and it seems to be delivered quite well. I have a feeling that many of the characters that have been introduced are never going to be seen again. I don't think the purple man giant that ran off is ever going to feature in the story again. He's just gone. I'm going to be surprised if Spirit ever comes back either. But, you know, we got a little group together now. I think the group is probably going to stay together. Maybe have some interactions with one another. So that's kind of interesting. We're probably going to forget that we're after a dragon. I'm going to level with you. I don't think the AI is going to hold information to know it needs to bring a dragon back in a chapter's time. I think the concept of a dragon has just gone out the window. But potentially, it's, you know, the idea's there. The world seems vaguely interesting. I'm not sure why we hate the sun or green trees, but, you know, we all have preferences, right? One thing that impresses me after having read through the script is that the title screen remarkably fits the scenario. It doesn't look anything like the character, but is that Ortega looking down at the nearby town with the market and the castle in his strange new world? I think it is. For reference, the title screen was made by feeding in the phrase "into a different realm." That's this artwork is supposed to represent into a different realm. And the title, Into a Different Realm, is surprisingly good. The title, Into a Different Realm, was created by feeding in the entire script into a headline generator. So it's done a pretty good job of marrying all that stuff up. Character names is interesting. As I said at the beginning, Ortega was chosen deliberately so I could talk about myself because I'm big-headed like that. Everyone else was generated completely at random, which is strange because I have featured a character called Mina before in certain videos on my channel. She's a character from a video game. And Togami and Yamada are both the names of characters from Danganronpa, which is a visual novel, which is what this is, essentially. And I did not influence that in any way, shape, or form. Those are the names that randomly came out of the AI. And that's kind of spooky. But there they are. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of amazed at how well AI can do. And the thing that I accept about AI is that it's never going to be perfect. But if you just give it a little steering hand, so if it's AI predominantly with a human overseer, I think you can make something really acceptable. I'm not going to say amazing, but acceptable with the AI generated content. I think AI could create an entire game and have it not suck. And that blows my mind. And one of the main things about AI is that it tends to grow exponentially, right? Because the AI learns to learn better. And the new better AI learns to learn even better. So I'm expecting there to be a time where AI-created content in the gaming world is gonna be a thing. Because it's already kinda solid for story writing. And the graphics are kind of acceptable. Now, I'm not going to say they're great, but, bear with me, I think Ortega looks pretty good. He's got a sort of Dragon Ball feel to him. But the expressions, when I made the AI give him different expressions, I couldn't believe it. Okay, this one's awful, but it's hilariously awful. The scared face is just textbook quality. I really like some of the expressions. Ortega's the only character that has expressions because he's the only character that talks in multiple scenes, but I don't know. I'm impressed. Anyway, this has been my random foray into the world of artificial intelligence. A world in which I know nothing about. Well, I knew nothing about. Now I know very little about, but something. I learned something. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you found it interesting. Maybe I'll continue it someday. I've no idea. If I do, then hopefully you'll join me for that. And I shall see you then.